Welcome to the first of our new weekly pre-Shabbat Devar Torah Words of Inspiration. I hope this helps you understand the words of our living Torah and how it relates to us in today's times. This week's Torah portion is called Bo, which means come. This portion has such relevance to what has happened to Jews for millennia, and more importantly, what is happening again to Jews today around the world. Parshat Bo mentions the final 3 plagues, and this is what we read about the final plague, the killing of the firstborn. And Pharaoh awoke, he and all his officials and all the rest of Egypt. There was a great cry, as there was no house where there was no death. Now, if the Torah says that Pharaoh awoke, it must mean that until then he had been sleeping. Now, we know that everything written in the Torah is there to teach us some kind of a lesson, be it ethical, or legal, or inspirational. So let's go back and remember this statement from just before that last plague. Moshe said to Pharaoh in God's name, "Around midnight I will go out in the midst of Egypt. Every firstborn in Egypt will die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh sitting on the throne. There will be a great cry of anguish throughout all of Egypt." Now, how could Pharaoh sleep knowing what was to befall his country? Unlike his predecessor, who, when awakened from his sleep, summoned Joseph for the benefit of the country, this Pharaoh didn't care about the fate of his own people. It's hard to imagine that a human being possessed of even one iota of sensitivity could sleep after a death sentence had just been proclaimed on his nation. But sadly, this is the way of the cruel and wicked. Human suffering means little to them, as long as they can cling to power. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And maintaining his own power, well, that was at the heart of Pharaoh's regime. He said to his people, "The Israelites are becoming too numerous for us. Come, let us outsmart them, lest they join our enemies during wartime." So what does he do? He takes away all their rights as citizens and he makes them slaves, just because they are Israelites. The Israelites had been living in Egypt for hundreds of years as loyal Egyptians. First and foremost, they were Egyptians. They had become so assimilated, in fact, that when Moshe finally liberated them, 80% stayed behind. Yet in the eyes of Pharaoh, they were still no more than Israelites whom he just wanted to use as human fodder. Once he enslaved them, Pharaoh gave orders to all his people to legally practice murder on the Israelites. Every boy who is born must be cast into the Nile. There are problems in your society? Well, of course, blame the Jews. Demonize the Israelites. That's how it always starts. But with Pharaoh, ultimately his lust for power eventually leads to the downfall of his own people. Blindness to humanity is nothing new. While babies were being thrown into the Nile, Pharaoh was relaxing in bed. It was only when his own son lay dead in front of him that Pharaoh was really awakened from his sleep. Reality had finally begun to sink in. And Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron during the night. Not surprisingly, when his regime is finally crumbling before his eyes, Pharaoh now releases his hostage slaves. Pharaoh learns nothing. With the children of Israel gone after the final plague, Pharaoh's thirst for power leads him to take his top troops and chariots on nothing more than a suicide mission, chasing the Israelites all the way to the Red Sea. Today, there are many leaders who follow in his footsteps, leaders who care more for power than they do for their own people. The result is always horrifying, but more disturbingly, the Jews are nearly always blamed. Let us unite to fight this madness currently prevalent in our world, to ensure that all evil people are made to wake up to reality. I wish you Shabbat Shalom.